Welcome to the Patriot Rising. We are the resistance. Please make sure to subscribe, ring that bell icon, and share our videos. Today we are discussing the raw truth of Operation Northwood. This is not speculation or conspiracy theory, but information declassified from U.S. government documents. So take a seat and strap yourselves in. April 1961, the United States launched a top-secret invasion into Cuba. It was to be quick, surgical, quiet, but instead it became one of the greatest foreign policies disaster in American history. Over 1,400 CIA-backed exiles stormed the beaches of the Bay of Pigs, and within 3 days they were either captured, killed, or forced to surrender. The plan was to overthrow Fidel Castro. What America got instead was global embarrassment. In the months that followed, something changed inside the United States national security apparatus. Publicly, Washington claimed restraint. Privately, however, it was a different story. Behind closed doors, military officials believed the only way forward was to go to war. But with the American people still reeling from the failed invasion, public support wasn't guaranteed. That is when a new plan was drafted. One that would guarantee outrage from the American people. One that would unite the nation, and one that, if approved, would cross a line no country should ever entertain. A plan that, if executed, would have killed innocent Americans on American soil just to start a war. This plan called for hijackings, bombings, staged funerals, even fake airliner explosions. And none was being communicated by a foreign country. It came from the American Pentagon itself. Now I must remind you, this wasn't some rogue idea floating around the mailroom. This plan was signed off by the Joint Chiefs of Staff. They called it Operation Northwoods. So why would the U.S. military plan a false flag terrorist attack on its own people? And what does it say about our leaders who are willing to cross such lines when they know no one is watching? The Bay of Pigs wasn't just a military disaster. It was a psychological one as well. For the CIA, it was a gut punch, for the Pentagon a humiliation, and for the Kennedy administration it was a PR nightmare. What most Americans did not realize was President Kennedy had only been in office for 3 months when the invasion began. He had not created the plan. He had inherited it. A CIA scheme created under the Eisenhower administration that was already in motion by the time he took the oath of office. The invasion had been sold as airtight, but in reality it was underfunded, poorly coordinated, and based on wildly assumptions about the Cuban people rising up against Castro. Well, they didn't. The world watched as America's covert operation fell apart in real time. Castro paraded prisoners around in front of cameras. Khrushchev mocked U.S. weakness. And inside Washington, patience wore thin. And once given the green light, the failure landed on Kennedy. The Joint Chiefs of Staff, America's top military leaders, began pushing for something far more aggressive. They didn't want another half-baked mission. They wanted a full-scale invasion into Cuba. But there was a problem. The American people did not want another war. Not after Korea, not after the Bay of Pigs. And without a public outrage, there could be no mandate for military action. This is when a new idea emerged. Not one based on intelligence or diplomacy, but on manipulation. If the government could not win the hearts and minds of the American people, then they would manufacture the crisis themselves. On March 1962, the U.S. Department of Defense submitted a proposal that would send shockwaves through history, though the public would not learn about it for another 35 years. The proposal was called Operation Northwoods, and it came directly from the Joint Chiefs of Staff, America's highest-ranking military brass. And it wasn't just one bad idea, it was a checklist of chaos. The plan outlined a series of false flag operations, attacks that would appear to have been carried out by Cuba, but were actually staged by the U.S. government. The goal was to create a public justification for a full-scale military invasion. These false flags were to be fake hijackings of commercial airliners, bombings in Miami, Florida, Washington, D.C., and even inside military installations. A drone airliner painted to match a real passenger flight would be remotely destroyed over Cuban waters. A list of fake victims complete with staged funerals would be published to sell the illusion. They even consider sinking a U.S. Navy ship and faking Cuban sabotage or staging a deadly riot among Cuban exiles of Florida supposedly incited by Castro's agents in America. The memo even referenced the main incident, a nod to 1898 when a mysterious explosion of a U.S. warship triggered war with Spain. They wanted to follow the same blueprint, manufacture a tragedy, blame the enemy, and rally the nation. One memo proposed assassinating Cuban refugees or American civilians to generate a helpful wave of indignation across the country. These were not theoretical suggestions buried in footnotes. They were written in plain language, deliberate, and the Joint Chiefs of Staff didn't just brainstorm the plan, they signed off on it. The document, as approved by General Lyman Lemniter, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and delivered to the Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara on March 1962. From there, it was presented to President Kennedy. Thankfully for the American people, Kennedy was still in his first year of presidency and still weathering the blowback from the Bay of Pigs. The Joint Chiefs of Staff had gone too far. Operation Northwoods wasn't a military plan, it was a blueprint for domestic terrorism. A document signed by the most powerful generals in America. These were the Pentagon's top brass. And Kennedy rejected it and shut the whole thing down, no discussion. Northwoods, as quietly buried, locked away in the Class 5 vault of the Pentagon for over 35 years. But Northwoods resurfaced in 1997 when it was uncovered through a sweep of documents released by the JFK Assassination Records Review Board. For historians, it became a case study in how far a democracy can drift behind closed doors. For others, it raised darker questions. Why would a government even consider something like this? What else has been hidden? And even worse, what has played out? These are questions every American should ask themselves when we see government rattle the sabers, when we see unrest in our country, when major event happens and our government officials say to look over here, look at what the enemy has done to us. The American people need to question everything. We are the patriot rising. We are the resistance. Stay safe and stay prepared.